Hey folks, today's video is going to walk you through the assignment for April 24th called Introduction for Chavez RASA. This should take about 45 minutes for you to complete. You have Monday and Tuesday to do it. On Tuesday office hours, I will be there to help you out if you feel stuck on this, but hopefully the video will lead you through the assignment for today. So let's get started. When you open the assignment, it'll say, please view the video attached, which you're watching now, and use the notes you began on the 420 assignment. So I'm going to open up that 420 assignment and click where it says AP Rhetorical Analysis Guide. That is this document here, which we've already started. If you were with me in office hours, we did this together, but hopefully you've already done steps 1 through 3 on your own. If this chart is not filled out, or if you have not read the Chavez essay yet, you really have to go back and do that first. Otherwise, writing introduction will be almost impossible. The other thing I'm going to open up is, let's open up the actual assignment for today where it says Chavez RASA. It's going to open up a blank essay document for you. And the last thing I want to open up is the essay itself, which is back here in 420, just so I have that copy. Now, I don't want you to freak out. This essay we're going to be spending, a week and a half writing it. The only thing we're going to do today is write our introduction. So we're just writing a short introduction today. So here's what you should have open. Have the speech open, or the letter open, have your RASA open, and have this outline open. The first thing I want to do is go down to step 4 where it says draft your thesis. So draft your thesis on scrap paper, or you can type it down here. Your thesis may be more than 1 sentence. So you might have a 2-sentence thesis. You might even have a 3-sentence thesis. That's possible. But it's going to include these things: the title, speaker, and genre, and maybe in a different order. So I'm going to start with that. Your thesis may look similar to mine, and that's okay. Let me just go back to the speech. Well, let's do this. So the title is, do we know the title? Published an article in the magazine for a religious organization. So we don't know the title of this. So we're going to have to kind of get creative here. So instead of the title, we'll write in his speech to, or in his, this is not a speech, in his article for a religious publication. And that's going to kind of be my title. And I'm going to add Cesar Chavez. And we actually already have genre, right? Because the genre is that it's a letter. So I have, or the genre, I'm sorry, is that it's an article or it's an essay. Maybe let's make it essay. In his essay for a religious publication, so essay is our genre. The title is going to be, essay for religious publication. That's the whole title, and Cesar Chavez. Now, something I want to push you on. Well, let me show you this first, actually. So in his essay for religious publication, Cesar Chavez employs, and it says 2 or 3 rhetorical choices. So my rhetorical choices were historical allusion and rhetorical questions. So he employs historical allusions and rhetorical questions. And then the purpose. What does he want the audience to understand or believe? So in order to, and I'm going to go back to my rhetorical verbs. In order to, I'm just going to go with right there with argue the value of nonviolent protest, and what does he want the audience to do? So he wants the audience to avoid violent confrontation, and he uses the rhetorical questions in order to argue and to convince his audience that no good will come of violent opposition. Let's see how that looks. In his essay for a religious publication, Cesar Chavez employs historical allusions and rhetorical questions in order to argue the value of nonviolent protest and, I'll get rid of that, convince his audience that no good will come of violent oppression. This is solid. I have my title, speaker, off genre. I have my 2 to 3 rhetorical choices. Let's even just make it 2 rhetorical choices. 3 is going to lead to too long of an essay. And I have my purpose. What does he want them to understand or believe? He wants them to believe in the value of nonviolent protest. And what does he want them to do? He wants to convince them. Or if you want to even focus on what does he want them to do, he can convince them, convince the audience not to give in to the temptations of violent resistance. Bam. So now I'm really saying, what does he want them to do? He wants them to not give in. And he even mentions it can be tempting to want to fight back, but let's not do it. The one thing I want to add, and you'll see it here in the example, this appositive phrase I think is really good for if you want to get that sophistication point where you add in a positive to say who this person is. So in his essay for religious publication, Cesar Chavez, and we know here that he is a labor organizer and civil rights leader. So I'm going to Cesar Chavez, a religious, no, he's not religious, I'm sorry, a labor and civil rights leader, bam, employs historical allusions. This is a great thesis statement. So if your thesis looks like this, you're in good shape. I'm actually going to copy this, and I'm going to put it here in my essay just to save it for later, okay? Oh, wait, why didn't it copy? I think Miriam did it. Or maybe it was Jefferson this time. Wait, for real, why is it not pasting? There it is, cool. So now let's start looking at our essay a little bit. First things first, let's replace this with our name. The due date is actually not going to be, let me double check, make sure you give me the right due date. It's not due until May, let's make sure it's the 3rd, yep, May 3rd, 2020. So we have a lot of time on this. And the title's already given to us, Cesar Chavez Rhetorical Analysis, bam. So here's what you're gonna want, my friends. After you've written your thesis, below this it says write your essay, and it gives you an outline. So here's the outline for the introduction. I'm going to copy this over just so I don't have to keep flipping back and forth. And there it is. Oh, that looks really ugly. Why does that look so ugly? I don't know. We'll delete it later. So the first thing I want to do is introduce the rhetorical situation. I only want to include the most important elements of the rhetorical situation. So I'm not going to go through all 5 of these things. Like that would be a pretty long statement. So I got to think about, he's arguing about nonviolence. Which of these are most important? Well, the fact that he's a civil rights activist, that seems important. The fact that he's speaking after Martin Luther King was assassinated, and that we know that MLK was famous for nonviolence, is important too. So I really want to get these 2 things in there. So I'm going to start here by introducing the rhetorical situation. 10 years after the assassination, famed nonviolent leader and civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr., another nonviolent activist, Cesar Chavez, wrote or published an essay in a religious magazine. Let me double check that it is actually a magazine. I'm going to go back here. Yeah, it's an article in the magazine of a religious organization. Now, so far what I've done here is I've talked about the speaker, I've talked about the exigence. I've kind of talked about the context because the 1970s, because I know that if it's 10 years after King was assassinated, we're in the 70s. And I want to maybe address this audience here because I can still eat up a little bit of space with my rhetorical situation. So religious people who help those in need. Chavez, well, Chavez hoped to inspire his audience to persist in helping the needy, but to do so in the model of Dr. King himself by employing nonviolent techniques rather than give into the violent, I'm going to get the more context, in the violent protests that characterized the Vietnam era of the 1960s. So that's talking about context, right? We know that Chavez's whole thing is he's saying nonviolence works, even though violence seems like it's really going to be more effective. And the reason people might believe that is because in the 1960s, during the Vietnam War, it was all about violence. So let's see. I want to see if I did number 1. This was about introducing the most important parts of the rhetorical situation. 10 years after the assassination of famed nonviolent leader and civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr., another nonviolent activist, Cesar Chavez, published an essay in a religious magazine. Chavez hoped to inspire his audience to persist in helping the needy, but to do so in the model of Dr. King himself by employing nonviolent techniques rather than giving into the violent protests that characterized the era of the 1960s. Sweet, I'm going to get rid of that. Now, my thesis, guess what? I already wrote it. So I'm just going to copy it up here, put it here, make sure the font is consistent. I think this all should be Arial. Where's Arial? There we go. Now let's make sure that I'm going to get rid of this table. Go away, table. And now I'm going to make sure, I just want to make sure this flows. So characterized the Vietnam era of the 1960s. In his essay 4, I'm going to make this the religious publication because I already mentioned it up here. Cesar Chavez, a labor and civil rights leader, employs historical allusions and rhetorical questions in order to argue the value of nonviolent protest and convince his audience not to give in to the temptation of violent resistance. So this part about the temptation of violent resistance sounds a lot like this thing about the Vietnam War violence. I'm okay with that because I really want to keep the Vietnam War piece in order to talk about the context here. But this is a very successful introduction paragraph. The last thing I'm going to suggest you do, and I think this is for everybody, I'm going to copy this entire thing over and go to Grammarly. Whoop, that's not how you spell Grammarly. And this is a tip for anybody. You cannot do this on the AP test, but we can do it now. You can add the Chrome extension, or you can just log in. Let's do that. But if you're not using Grammarly on a regular basis, you're probably getting a lot of errors that you could easily avoid. And Grammarly is free if you use the basic version. So let's do it. Come on. And we'll just hit new. And all you're going to do is put in whatever you wrote. Whatever. And let's see what let's see what it's correcting for me. Okay, so this says it should be activists, and that's actually wrong because there's only one activist here, so that's wrong. Did I spell Cesar Chavez wrong? Let's check. C-E-S-A-R. Whoa, I spelled Cesar Chavez wrong. Let me fix that one. Giving into. Nice, that should be 2 words. I'm glad I caught that. I did that intentionally. They don't like in order to. So we're going to simplify and change it to 2. That's fine. That into is actually correct. So just be careful. Like sometimes it'll make a suggestion that it thinks is right but may not be correct. But good. It fixed some stuff for me. I'm going to copy that all over and paste that back in. Make sure it's indented. But there also is the Grammarly add-on, which I have right here. If you turn that on, it should catch the mistakes right in your document. And I highly suggest you use that. But either way, the most important thing for today is that you are finishing your introduction paragraph. It will not be much longer than what I have written here. If it is, you've probably written too much about the rhetorical situation, so make sure to keep it concise. It really is just going to, if I go back to the outline, it's just these 2 pieces. We're going to work through body paragraphs next week. Don't worry about those today. For now, just worry about the introduction paragraph. As always, email me if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with on Sunday night. Okay? Email me if you have any questions or ideas, thoughts or questions, and I'll see you later. Bye.